I don't know. I don't know if you can see that, but I made in the middle bookshelf because I was very envious of your and Susan's bookshelf.
Oh,
So
you made a mini bookshelf. How nice.
I did. I
Mini
know.
me.
Yeah. Well, I just moved some of the books. And we should have already the next group lined up, who is San Francisco. So San Francisco Bay Area, um, if you're on in the backstage, then just join with your audio and video, and we will let you right in. Some mentions. So we have had over 7,000 signups. Our stretch goal was 6,000. So thank you all for doing this. This is awesome. We also had at the top, I think we had 1,097 concurrent attendees.
Right.
And we are now, because those big chunks of places are now sleeping, we are down now to between 500 and 1,000. And Alex, okay, I think
No, I just
okay.
Yeah.
That is all. I need to add a poll on Las Vegas. So I will do that while Jesse, you, hi Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah. Hello, how are you guys?
So
can you hear me all right?
Here.
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish the lighting in the room we're in were better, but it's still dark here in Geneva. So early morning, it's beginning to, I see this, yeah, I see the sun thinking about coming around.
So I saw Peter, I've been checking in throughout the, oh man, I guess it's 8 p.m. now, so throughout the day. And so Peter has been on almost every time I've checked in. So I hope he has a lot of coffee.
Yeah. Well, I was there for a long time too. We basically, alternated a little bit during the nighttime hours, but here we are back at the close. We have 2 more sessions, yours and then South Korea, to wrap things up. You're being joined by somebody, right?
Yeah,
on
so
stage.
Carl will be joining us just a couple minutes after.
Yeah. Okay.
And let me go ahead and try to share my screen real quick, just to see if we can see this. Okay.
Yeah, be sure and let everybody know, who you are and what your group is doing and all that stuff.
Great. Yeah. The screen isn't sharing. You guys don't see the screen yet, do you?
Not yet.
Okay.
Are you on Chrome or Firefox?
I am on Firefox.
Okay, so it should be fine.
Let's see. Let's try this one more time. Here we go. Okay, still not sharing, huh?
No, your screen should appear like a speaker, actually.
Right. Okay.
Little square.
Let me quickly just refresh.
Yeah.
In just a second.
Okay, no problem. So while Alex works on his screen, his back. So you see the share icon, I assume.
Yeah, so the one at the bottom here next to the microphone.
Right.
It is giving me option to share, but let me...
There's probably a pop-up hiding or something like that.
Yeah. Let me try this in Chrome. So just a moment.
Okay. No problem.
I'll educate the people with the thought of if you were participating in a Las Vegas event, your session, and you can still have the poll on the right hand side. But just the same question around how you like that. There again.
I think Chrome is the winner. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and we can see your screen, so that's awesome.
Okay, fantastic. So Carl should be joining us in just a moment or so. Carl is a design recruiter and UX designer. So, but before I jump into that, Jesse, are you going to, would you like to do a quick intro to 24 Hours UX for those of you that are
joining? If anybody's just joining, you're reaching us at the tail end of 24 Hours of UX. We're in hour 23. So this started yesterday morning for me, and it's already the next day in the morning. It's been an awesome journey. We quite literally have traveled around the world on over 6 continents. Well, not over 6 continents to be exact. We haven't gone to Antarctica, and across the oceans. It's just been incredible. The participation level from the audience when it's in terms of engagement and in chat between each other. I've been in a number of breakout sessions as well throughout the day where there's been a lot of in-depth conversation about a particular topic. And that'll be an opportunity for you as well, Alex, after this. So you can bring, some of your audience or, whoever's interested and still watching at this time over into sessions. And there's a San Francisco session where you can basically have a Zoom call with up to 20 people, and then other people can watch. And when people drop off their video, other people can be added, and you can moderate that. So that's a little bit for Hopin. There's also a networking. Sorry, I'll point the other way. There's a networking icon where you can do some speed dating with other UXers who are here online right now. And then, of course, here we are on the main stage where we've been broadcasting for 24 hours, almost. And it's all being recorded. So that's usually the common question that we get in the chat is this being recorded? And the answer is yes. And we hope the recordings are decent. We haven't seen them yet because we've been doing this. So within the next, I would say 10 days, we'll have something up online that everybody can view if you missed a particular session over this 24-hour period. This event is sponsored by some very fine organizations, Adobe XD, thank you very much. UX Testing, Inc. Also, those are our 2 main sponsors, and then we have some we have some associate sponsors. Sorry, I'm not firing all yet because I just woke up. Associate sponsors, which include Whitespace and Holistique here in Geneva and Big Design Events in the US. So I'll turn it over to you, Alex, now, and Carl, and welcome aboard the Crazy Ship UX. Have fun. I'll be on the backstage, so if you need me, I'm not gone. Just holler, and I'll come back.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Great. And so once again, I will say thank you to Jesse and Peter, who have been really kind of going around the world. And it's been really cool to pop in and see everything. And if you haven't already, definitely check out the mural they have where you could drag a pin and mark the spot for your location, because there's quite a bit of folks joining us from around the world. So I will do a quick introduction, and then we're going to go into kind of like a curated QA session where we ask members of San Francisco user experience designers and Silicon Valley UX designers some questions about recruitment in the world of recruitment in the world of design. And so before we do, just a quick quick note about who we are as an organization. And by the way, if the slides appear a little bit small, I believe you should be able to stretch them out or expand them. But really, we're just using them as reference for the conversation. And so before I give a formal introduction to Carl, a little bit about who we are as an organization. We are Global UXD. We have chapters in several different cities around the world. We were originally started in Berlin, and we still have an active chapter in Berlin, and then made our way over to the US, where San Francisco is now one of the larger groups, where San Francisco and Silicon Valley, we've kind of separated them in terms of geographic locations and where we host the events. And so we have almost 9,000 to 10,000 members just in the San Francisco and Silicon Valley area alone. And this was started back in 2014. Carl is one of the co-organizers along with Mila. And I guess I don't have an interest like, oh, actually I do right here. To give you guys some information about Carl, who we'll be chatting about. Carl is a design recruiter for product design. He's a career coach and product designer himself, and is currently at Facebook. What we're going to do, he's going to walk us through a little bit about his background and how he arrived at Facebook, and then we'll open it up to QA. So first we have the curated QA session, which we collected through our Slack and other channels. And then we're going to open it up. So if you do have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat, and we'll try our best to address it. As Jesse mentioned, we are going to be moving over to the breakout session afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to say welcome, Carl.
Thank you, Alex, and thanks everyone. I appreciate it having me here today. Yeah, so I would say I started in design, and I worked at sorry, let's go back to schooling. I wanted to get into design, and so I went to I did some classes at a local community college here, and then I went to Academy of Art University in San Francisco, and then I decided that was kind of too expensive for me, and then I kind of dove into a boot camp called Block. It's a very well-known boot camp. I took some other courses at General Assembly. I tried out there, Design Lab, which is another online boot camp. So I'm very well versed in all the boot camps and still working with a bunch of students today. After diving into some of the design schools, I worked for I started an app called Press T. I was also a golf professional at the time, teaching golf, and the golf was kind of lacking a reservation system for mobile, and so a few of us started working on Press T, and then I jumped over to an accelerator program called Plug and Play, which is kind of an accelerator program in the Bay Area, but I believe they're worldwide now. I also worked with a company called Flint, doing Google retail apps in the Bay Area. Biggest customer was Google. And then I went over to Amsterdam, and I worked for a company called Startup Bootcamp. I believe they're in San Francisco now, but they're mainly in Amsterdam, Germany, London, Australia, and so forth. I was there for about 7 months. I was an entrepreneur in residence. I worked with about 11 different startups. And then I came back to the US and I worked for a company called 500 Startups, which is another kind of incubator or accelerator program. So you can kind of see I enjoyed working for startups. I kind of left the design world for a little bit and got into recruiting. I worked for an agency called the Creative Group, which is a Robert Half company. And then I went in-house at BCG Digital Ventures and now at Facebook. So, I definitely have a passion for design. Obviously, you can see I'm staying in design and recruiting design. And so a lot of expertise in that. But yeah, I think I've been at Facebook now for about 2 years, almost 2 years now, and so enjoying and loving it.
Great, awesome, and you've definitely touched a lot of well-known brands along the way. 500 Startups, or your work with Google. Can you tell us a little bit about the teams that you either work with or work for at Facebook?
Yes, so I work on the enterprise team. One of the biggest enterprise tools for Facebook is a tool called Workplace. It's basically a Facebook for your employees, in a nutshell. So your public Facebook is flipped for your employees. So you have chat, groups, pages, and so forth. So basically, it's a collaboration tool for your employees.
Okay, cool. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about portfolios first, but then kind of segue into networking. There's a series of questions we got that are more technical regarding the portfolio. And then as we kind of go on, the questions I have here are broaden up a little bit. So I guess the first question, and maybe even I'll preface by saying, what is one of the most common questions that you do get about portfolios?
I think having enough projects on your portfolio and experience. I always say it's good to have your strongest projects in your portfolio. You're kind of selling yourself, right? And so I always say, put 3 or 4 different, quality projects. I'm a big stickler for. I know a lot of boot camps these days focus on UX design, but I think having strong UI skills is very beneficial also. You have to remember that a lot of recruiters don't have a design background like me. So a lot of them are kind of trained to look at a beautiful and good looking portfolio. And that's what kind of passes you through to the next round.
And so when we're talking about the portfolio, the next question is, should you get personal? But in reality, it's more, I kind of want to go towards the direction of storytelling. So I guess the question here is, should you get personal on your portfolio, either the about section or otherwise? And maybe can you elaborate on the idea of storytelling through the portfolio?
Yeah, I think showing your personality is good. If it's showing colors in your portfolio or how artistic you are, right? Even having an about me page talking about some of your hobbies and so forth, right? So the biggest thing is you want to try to relate to the other person on the other end of the portfolio looking at it, right? So if it's a school connection or a sport connection or a club connection, I think it always helps, right? So I think it's always good to add that about me page, definitely to your portfolio. Storytelling, I think, is a tough one for a lot of people. I'm still learning myself, but I think the biggest thing, for interviewing is just practice talking through how you became a designer, how you became, working at, Facebook. How did you get there? What were your goals, right? And what have you learned so far, right? And those are kind of the big things that you kind of want to add. And I think another thing is having excitement on your voice, especially now working remotely. Mostly everyone in the world right now working remotely, and that there's not really anybody on the end. There's no video and so forth. A lot of these phone calls, right? So I think the biggest thing is to have an excitement in your voice, right? And I believe it goes a long way. Just confidence and excitement.
Cool. So the next question I have is about percentages. So I guess percentages of skill sets, I think it relates. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I see it a lot. I think I used to see it a lot more than I do now. But you'll have you'll have some people that say 80% development, 40% UI, UX, and so forth, right? And I think everyone wants you to be 100%. So I think you're kind of selling yourself short, right? So I believe personally, my personal opinion is take out your percentages because I think it just kind of sells yourself short.
You say about like labeling the skill sets on your resume or portfolio in general. I think a lot of people put like, this much Figma, this much Sketch, this much Photoshop, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
I think just writing down Sketch, Figma, Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever you want. I don't think you should put any percentages. You could put the logos, whatever you want, but no percentages.
Great. And if you are in the chat, maybe you could type out what kind of tool you've been using as of late, in case you are using any new tools. I think that might be interesting for us to go back to.
Yeah.
And so the next question I want to ask is, regarding, you already answered like the question about how many pieces, but of those pieces that are in the portfolio, how many of them need to have full-blown case studies?
So I think nowadays, all of these boot camps do a very good job of setting up portfolios, right? You have personas, case studies, low fidelity, high fidelity, wireframes, and so forth, right? I think one or two examples with full-blown case studies and so forth is good. I believe at the end of the day, a recruiter or the hiring manager is going to look through quickly that you could do them in general, but I think a lot of them really want to see like polished work, and if you're able to do the skills.
Okay, great. And we have some answers coming in through the chat now. We have Miro, Figma, Sketch, Adobe XD, Figma, Miro, and someone said, Phil said Miro has been awesome for these COVID times. And then looks like a couple others as they come in. So keep bringing them in. Great. Well, so Carl, you had mentioned that you were working with Startup Bootcamp or Startup Basecamp?
Yeah, Startup Bootcamp.
Startup Bootcamp. You were working with Startup Bootcamp in Amsterdam, and then you did some work with companies that were in 500 startups. And now being at Facebook, what's the difference in terms of design hiring needs from these smaller companies to maybe some of these larger giants?
That's a good question. I think I think nowadays, especially, everyone is calling themselves, product designer now, right? And so I think a lot of these companies kind of want to see a well-rounded designer. Not every company is the same, but I think sometimes it comes down to budget and what they're looking for on their team. But I think if you work at a small startup, they definitely want you to be a well-rounded designer, able to do maybe research, UI, UX, and so forth, right? I think when you get to the bigger companies, they have the resources to, hire people that are stronger at UI or stronger at UX, and they usually have a team of their own researchers, right? So I think it's definitely really important to be a well-rounded designer.
So this is a nice segment into a question we have from Mylan. He says, if you start working as a lead designer for a company, do you think it would be more preferable to join when there is a team already, or to join and build a team from scratch?
I think it's all preference. So I talk to a lot of designers that they're a one-person team at a company, and they want to go get more experience, and they want to go into a bigger team, right? I talk to a lot of people that work on a big team, but they want to go start their own team, right? I think big companies, you're able to, if there's a new product that comes out and so forth, or a new feature, you're able to maybe go and start your own team under that product, right? It's not the best answer right now, but I think it's definitely all preference. For me, I worked at, for recruiting wise, an agency was kind of smaller. Worked for another BCG Digital Ventures. It was a pretty mid-sized team, but now Facebook has thousands of recruiters, right? And I'm able to try out different projects, right? So for me, I wanted to go to a bigger team, right? Even though I was a designer, I worked for all pretty much small teams. It was like me or maybe another person, right? But I think you do get a lot more experience, especially early in your career, going to a bigger team size, right? And then if you get comfortable and you move to lead or director role or whatever you want, then maybe trying to go out and work for a smaller startup and hopefully build out your team.
Great, and we have some great questions coming in, so we'll try to get to all of them. But just as a follow-up, what are some like how big do the teams get, and how big do the design teams get at a company like Facebook, for example?
Yeah, usually about, let's just say 9, 10-ish designers on each team. It all depends on the product and so forth, but generally maybe 9 or 10 designers, 1 or 2 researchers. Everyone's called a product designer. There's not really any senior or mid-level or junior. They go by different leveling, like a bunch of other big companies do. But there's about 9 or 10-ish designers on each team, but it all depends on the product.
And so we have a question from Brianna. Do you feel there's still room for designers who are not as experienced in research, but have a stronger expertise in UI or visual design?
Yes. I'm trying to answer that question correctly. So can you read that question to me one more time?
The question was, do you feel there's still room for designers who maybe are not as experienced in research, but are very strong on the visual design side of things? And I think, you had mentioned there are teams of 9. Perhaps on those bigger teams, are there people dedicated to just doing design? And maybe how does that contrast between smaller teams where you said they're kind of many hats versus bigger teams that are more specialized?
I think your Googles and Amazons and Facebooks, Microsofts, and so forth, right? Again, they have the resources to hire their own researchers, and they'll put them together with designers, right? If you move to a smaller startup, most likely you're gonna be doing the end-to-end design. So you might be doing some research, some UI and UX. So yes, I think there is room, but I think if you go to a big company, they're going to want you to do research and have a lot of experience in research, or design, and not both.
So since a lot of the questions that are coming in are related to different levels of seniority, can you tell us a little bit about leveling and why it's important, especially from maybe one company to another company?
Yeah. So, a big thing that I've been learning more recently is leveling, right? So leveling is, some startups will use, junior, mid, senior, director, manager, and so forth, right? Big companies will use IC 5, 4, 3, 7, 6, right? And these are all different levels for like individual contributor. Then you have your managers, directors, VPs, and so forth, right? Some people will work at let's just say like a 10-person startup. They're a VP of design, but they'll come to a larger company like Facebook or Amazon, and they'll be an individual contributor, right? Because now they're working with, 10,000 designers and not just 5, right? So, but some people want to stay as an individual contributor. Some people want to stay as a manager. So it really all depends on your preference, what you want to do. If you want to be in leadership and so forth. But most likely, the bigger the company it is, the levels will change kind of seniority and so forth. I think, pay-wise, all these companies in the Bay Area and out of the Bay Area, they're probably pretty similar where you live, right? But I think seniority always changes a little bit. If you want to stay in management, or if you want to be an IC, which is individual contributor.
Have you seen a lot of, this is kind of a personal question, and then we'll jump back into the topics, but have you seen a lot of designers transition to management roles personally? Have you seen that?
Yeah, a lot. I think if you're a lead designer and maybe you lead a team of like 4 designers, I think people will transition to a manager. I think like at a big company, but I think it might be a little bit easier transitioning into management if you're at a small company of like 5 designers, for example, right? I think it all depends on the scope of the project, the team size, and so forth. Is a lot of people don't want to go into management and so forth, but I definitely do see that very often. Or I see people that go backwards, that they don't want to, not really backwards, but they don't want to be managers anymore, and they just want to be individual contributors, right? ICs.
I have a question from Andrew, and he asks about, showcasing your work when it's locked under an NDA. What are your thoughts? And I guess to add more details, should you lock things under a password, or I guess what are your thoughts on work that's under your NDA, especially if it's your best work? How do you manage that?
Good question. So here's my personal feeling about NDAs. I understand NDAs. I feel like NDAs weren't around 5 years ago, and I feel like now everyone has an NDA, and I feel like every portfolio is password protected. I think if you're trying to, so I get a lot of people, not now, but you see a lot of people, a lot of candidates that would put passwords on their portfolios in order to get in front of you, right? It's a little trick that people do, which I don't think it's a very fair trick. But I think if it's an NDA, you should password protect it. But I think at the end of the day, the company you're working for is going to want to see some of your work. I always thought about, if you work for Pizza Hut, for example, and you have an NDA, then throw Domino's logo on it, create a new one, just duplicate the same project and put Domino's on your project. So then it won't be a really NDA anymore, right? I don't think you could patent design work really that I know of. But a lot of NDA comes under new features, or in the consulting world is companies you work with, right? So I think it's fair to put a password on it, but I think just remember you're trying to get a job at this new company, and they're going to want to see your work that you're able to, pump out the work that the company wants.
That's right. Yeah. And I know that especially for visual work, you can always end up changing things around, or at least in the boot camps, I know there are a couple, example projects that can be used.
Change the color, change the logo, right? And then I think it's fine.
So we have a question from Pei-Ting, asks, for junior designers, do you think that it's more important to develop ourselves in breadths, or specialize? So I guess better for a wide range, or better to focus? Junior designers.
I think nowadays, like I said earlier, I think nowadays everyone's called, a lot of people are calling themselves product designers. It's a new thing that a lot of companies are hiring. I think personally, there's more jobs out there if you could be strong at UI and UX. I think end of the day, companies want really strong, polished work, but if you know how to work through the problem, then you'll be a lot more successful, and I think it'll be easier to find a job. If you want to be a researcher, stay in research, right? But I think being a UX designer only or UI designer only, I think it'll help if you're strong at both, or at least able to use design. Every company has a design system now, and so design patterns. So I think a lot of the UI is built out already, but I think a lot of UX designers, companies that are hiring UX designers, they want you to be, well diverse in UI design too.
So we'll get back to some of the portfolio questions shortly. And in a second, I'm about to ask about some tips or tricks. But before I do, we have a question from, and I just lost it here. It was a question from Hanani, and oh, here we go. For your portfolio, for the stuff that you really like. Oh, actually, no, that's not the question. Just a moment. Okay, Hanani, looks like I lost your question. So feel free to ask it again. We'll try to get to it. But to move on to tips and tricks, I actually want to first highlight a blog post. And Carl, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the blog post. And to preface, the blog post is part of the Envision Medium blog entitled "The Biggest Mistakes I See Designers Make When They Apply for a Job." And there's a short link to the blog post at the bottom right of the page, which is just globaluxd.com/blog Carl. Goes right there. But Carl, can you tell us a little bit about what these major mistakes are?
Yeah, I think we all do it. We're all guilty, but I think, grammar and spelling mistakes is a big one. I've definitely been guilty of that. If you're friends of mine, you know that. But I think, definitely put a good emphasis on grammar and spelling mistakes. I think I think on a portfolio is really good to have large and definitely clear images instead of being so pixelated, right? So there's a lot of good. If you're a designer, you should know how to do this already, but there are a lot of good YouTube videos how to you make high quality images, right? So I think in a portfolio, I think having larger images is awesome. I think it helps definitely show your work off a little bit better. I think another one is an out-of-date portfolio. Um, I feel like if you're a junior designer, mid-level designer, your portfolios are usually stronger than more senior and managers because no one really updates them. Um, but I always think that if you have old work on your portfolio, take it off or just polish it up and make it look newer. Um, and again, the percentages for each skill, I think, take that off the portfolio. I think that's definitely not needed. It definitely sells yourself short. But I think having, um, you know, definitely, wireframes, low fidelity, high fidelity, show a few of those. But I think showing well polished material will definitely help you get in front of those companies.
There was a question that came in about portfolios for senior designers. Is it less important for senior designers to have portfolios?
I think I've been yes and no. I think I've noticed that more recently. So I think it depends on the interview process of these companies. So Facebook's process, you will talk about some of your projects. You do a portfolio review, pretty much, right? Some companies do that already, or some companies do a design exercise. Then they're able to see your work, right? I think it's always. I feel like if you're a designer and if you're looking for a job, you should always have a portfolio. If you're not looking for a job, then it doesn't matter, right? But you want to sell yourself, right, and look good, right? So I think it's always good to have a strong portfolio, and then definitely learn just to put polished images on your portfolio. But I think even seniors, I feel like I've seen a lot less portfolios, but I still feel like it's pretty important.
Moonmita asks, is it a good idea to showcase freelance product design projects in the portfolio? And is it okay if it's not a big brand?
Yes. When I recruit, I go after every brand or every company. I don't really mind where you work. And so, I think freelance projects, as long as they're strong work, then show it. If it's not so strong, then maybe polish it up and then show it, right? I think sometimes it's always good to do some befores and afters. I like that too. So if you're doing, Southwest Airlines screen, you show the before and after, maybe in 2006 and 2020, design changed quite a bit, right? So I think it's always good to do some befores and afters too.
Thoughts on designers that only have a Dribble or Behance portfolio? Is that enough, or would you say they also need to have a separate .com, a separate web portfolio?
Yeah, I think on Behance now you're able to, I think maybe attach a PDF, or I think you can add more wireframes and show your work, right? Like you can on an actual website. Dribble, I think everyone's work is polished and perfect on Dribble. So I think if companies want to see your case studies and so forth, then you should use Behance more than Dribble. But if you're having fun and showing off your strong UI work, then like I post on Dribble, I do the designs, and everyone on Dribble is good. Everyone shows their polished design work, right? It's a place that it's an artwork, right, platform, right? So, but yeah, I think it's good to have your own website. I think it's always good to have your own branding. I own my first and last name.com, and I've had for long and forever, and I think it's always good to build your own brand. But if you want to just use Behance, I think that's fine too.
We have a question from Paula. As a senior UX designer, how can I start preparing for a future management role?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think taking more responsibilities, right? Trying to, onboard new designers, try to lead, lead initiatives, trying to lead designers on your team, right? I think, working with other cross-functional teams, like with research or marketing or sales and engineering, right? Be that diverse in that. So I think those are all things to help you be in management. I think it all comes down to, years of experience also.
A question from JY, and JY asks, is it possible to get started as a design manager without being a UX designer first? And they go on to describe that their background is in a design PhD, and they've been working in management and research commercialization, but they haven't been a UX designer per se. And it looks like they say, I'm doing skill exchange in a boot camp to practice management and leadership skills. So is it possible to get a design manager position if you haven't been a kind of strict UX designer in the past?
I think I've seen it a few times. I think I've seen like people be product managers more than being a design manager. I think it's more. I think it'll be easier. My guess, I've seen it would be easier to be a product manager on a design team rather than being a product design manager. I think a lot of product design managers have 10, 15 plus years of experience, right? That want to manage a team, but I think it'd be a lot easier, I feel like, if you're a product manager on a design team.
Phil asks, what did you spend most of your time on, like specifically as an early UX designer? And I guess the question does say, what do you spend most of your time on now? Although you have transitioned to a recruitment role, but maybe you could give us a little bit about, what you focus on as an early UX designer versus what you focus on as a senior UX designer.
I believe I focused more on UI design. I enjoyed it more. I believe I think a lot of people can, draw wireframes, conduct research, which is very hard still. But I also think UI design is very hard. And I knew that a lot of the startups that I worked for really wanted to get out their work. So they really needed to focus on UI. So that was the number one thing that I focused on.
Great. So I want to touch on portfolio schools a bit. You have been through an advisor to multiple portfolio schools. Can you tell us a little bit about these programs? And also, this kind of stems off one of the questions, I believe that came from Maribel, in that when you're starting out, is it good to jump into a portfolio school right away?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's so much resources out there. You could watch YouTube videos or Udemy courses and so forth. But I really liked having a mentor going over my projects with me. So I thought that was very, very helpful, right? I've done classes at pretty much all of them. I've worked with students at all of them. And I didn't mind probably like maybe 7, 8 years ago or so, around there. It probably wasn't as great as they are now, but I still work with a lot of students from them. I'm in contact with majority of the design schools out there, but they do a very good job now of working with their students. I wish they focused more on UI as much as they focus on UX. I think a lot of people struggle with UI, and it's a huge thing, and it's very important. I also think they need to do a better job on helping students after these courses instead of taking $15,000 from them. I think they're expensive, but I really think they need to do even a better job be holding the student's hand after their boot camp and making sure they get a job, right? That's helping them, connect with different design communities, companies, internships, whatever it may be. I think they need to do a good job in that.
You mentioned that she interviewed for a company and gave and was given a home design challenge, whiteboard challenge, so to speak, for an app review. What do you think about companies giving design challenges as part of the interview process? And have you seen any difference in terms of startups versus larger companies giving these challenges?
Yeah, I've done a number of them myself. I think everyone has their opinion on these, but I feel like if the design challenge is like an hour or so, maybe an hour or two, I think it's fair. But if it's an all-day thing, I don't think it's that fair. I think also I think it's really easy just to have the candidate, show two of their favorite projects that they worked on and walk through them. I think you could build questions around that, around product thinking. You could build questions around interaction design or UI design, UX design, and get enough information where they can do an hour interview and go over their portfolio instead of them spending 7, 8 hours and building trying to solve a problem for your company, right? So that's just my personal opinion. Again, I think it's an hour or two for design challenge. That's fine, but if it's going to be like all day thing, I don't think it's the fairest thing.
Matt asks, what are some examples of tasks during the interview and how do you deal with them? So if they're not necessarily a design challenge, what kinds of things might come up in an interview?
Yeah, I think a lot of them, I think a big question is, walk you through your process from start to finish. And it could be, a little higher review. We always get, I think it's always good to talk about what you worked on the project, what your team worked on. If you do work with other cross-functional teams like marketing or sales or engineering or researchers, I think that helps you, I think it helps tells the company kind of what groups you worked with. That's very helpful. So those are kind of, and then, it's kind of walking and talking about, what excites you about the projects or if any of the projects you worked on shipped or any milestones on, you guys implemented a new hamburger menu. It was green and it got 100,000 more conversions, right? Or whatever, right? That's not likely, but something around that where you could build, some stats and milestones around your story.
Great. We have a lot of great questions coming in, and so we'll answer a couple more of those before we transition to kind of discussion around networking. And so Lewis asks a great question. Do cover letters really have an impact in your selection process?
I would say no. I haven't seen one for a long time. I never really did one myself. So I think the answer would be no. That'll be very helpful.
Another question from Shuchi. Should you have a .com portfolio, and should that be separate from any type of portfolio that you show off in person? Their question specifically says like a keynote or a PowerPoint portfolio. So should they be different? And how should you differentiate what happens in the interview versus on your portfolio?
Yeah, I think some companies want you to do an actual presentation. So you could also just pull some images off your website. You can just screenshot them, right? And then put them onto a keynote presentation or PowerPoint, whatever you want to use, right? So I think, Dribbble, right, is for like high fidelity, gorgeous looking work. Then you have your website that can show some of your case studies and a few different projects and maybe some illustration work that you've done. But I think your presentation should maybe have, show some interaction work, talk about your team, maybe take a team photo, and kind of like, oh, I work with Alex at this company, Carl at this company. We're both designers, and Alex is a researcher, whatever, right, on my team, and just kind of talk about the cross-functional teams and so forth that you work with. I think, also think for presentation, you want to show just more high fidelity mockups.
As for the blog post URL, I will post it in the chat if someone hasn't already. We have a question from Jesse. What about design strategy, ideation skills, workshop skills? How do those kind of skills fall into play, and how do you assess them when you're recruiting?
I think I got that question right, but I think there are a lot of good courses out there about product thinking, walking through your work, talking about trying to solve a problem, right? I think these are all really strong things to learn. All companies will probably come up in an interview question, just simple questions like, if we had a deadline, you didn't make it, how would you solve this problem, right? And so forth, right? Just pressure questions, how you handle under pressure, right? But I think a lot of companies just want to see is how you think through the problem. Say, Spotify, we added, if I worked at Spotify, I would say, oh yeah, I worked on the CarPlay team. We actually added the buttons that are much larger now, right? Because we wanted to let people text and drive. We switched through songs on their phone, so we thought it'd be safer to make the buttons bigger and able to switch through songs, right? So I think they don't want to talk. They want to hear like, how did you guys come up with that? How do you solve it, and so forth.
Interesting comment, I believe, from maybe Andrew, I think, and it was that recently there was a design challenge, and he felt like they took the idea, or that maybe he mentioned sometimes they take the ideas, and so yeah, definitely a big no. So it's nice.
I've heard that so many times. Right. That's why I think it's kind of a gray area where doing design challenges. But if you really want to work there and they offer one, you have to do it, I guess.
Cool. So there's two more things I want to talk about before we wrap up. And within the next maybe 4 or 5 minutes, we'll be wrapping up and actually transitioning over to the sessions section, which is kind of a breakout style. But first, Carl, can you tell us about networking, meetups, Slack channels? Is this helpful? What's the best thing to do? How do you find these meetups and groups? Of course, we're in a global meetup right now, but COVID or not, what is the best way to find these groups?
I think having, just go to meetup.com, search, UX or product design groups. There's a ton of really good LinkedIn groups. Type in design Slack channels. Google Hangout, not Google Hangout, sorry. There's a bunch of really good design meetups. There's some for women only. There's some for everything, every diversity group, right? I think it's always good to just build a network and be positive in these groups because you never know who your manager's going to be or the person that's going to hire you, right? So I always say, be really encouraging when people post their work. Be nice. You could criticize, but criticize in a good way, right? Or give feedback in a good way, in a positive way. I think that's kind of a really good thing to learn, is just to be positive with everybody, because you never know who's going to be your next manager or who's going to be hiring you next.
Cool. And I think in the next couple of minutes, maybe can you overall a little bit about the interview process? And Nat specifically is asking, what are the UX processes that you use? But maybe tell us a little bit about the design process. Is there something that you look for? Is there a really nice design process that you have seen is either promoted by the groups that you work for, or is it winner?
Yeah, can you ask that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, so I kind of fudged it a little bit in the beginning, but when it comes to your UX design process, what is really the golden rule for design process? Is there anything that you would suggest or that really stands out?
Yeah, I think design process. I think you want to figure out how to get to A to Z, right? So I think it's really a big talk about start out, getting that. What's the idea? Who'll be working on it? Starting out with wireframes, personas, some research, and then polished UI screens, right? And then launch, right? I think everyone, has their design stand-ups and so forth, and they have all their different meetings. But I think that's kind of the basic path that kind of everyone takes. Every company does it differently, but I think that's kind of the main way to kind of, go through a design process.
Lastly, in terms of follow-ups, let's say after you have your interview, if you don't hear back, when should you follow up? What is a nice kind of system for that?
Yeah, I think recruiters are busy. We have lots of candidates that we're working with, but I think after if you apply online and don't hear back, I would try to find a recruiter at that company and then politely message them on LinkedIn, right? I get all the time, and I try to respond as much as I can. But recruiters get a million messages, right? So if they don't get back to them politely, respond again in the next couple of days, right? I wouldn't message them like 100 times because it gets irritating. But I think being persistent and following up goes a long way. That's what got me most of my jobs.
Well, there's definitely been some great questions coming in. We're actually able to cover quite a bit. Shout out to Weber Grills. It seems like half the audience either has a Weber Grill or knows about the Weber Grill app. I'm going to have to check it out. What we're going to do now is we're going to be transitioning over to the session space. And I know that there's another group that's going to be coming in. And so, Jesse, feel free to take it away as we transition over to the session space.
Yeah, thank you both. That was really interesting. It's very interesting how we've covered so many aspects of UX, from everything from the first session, which was what is UX, and how do you do it, and here we are. How do you get a job in it? How do you grow your career? It's really fascinating. I just have a quick question for Carl.
Yes.
If you're a designer and a golfer, does that help get a job at Facebook?
It does.
Oh, okay, good.
Only if you message me correctly. We'll slide you in a little bit.
All right, cool.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Thanks, Alex. And to everybody in the Bay Area, a big shout out. That's my home turf. Yep, grew up there. So Peter and I are, of course, coming to you live from Geneva, Switzerland, where it's the next day. So I realize it's getting probably dark now for you, Alex, outside?
Yes, it's now dark outside.
Dark.
Now dark, officially dark. Okay, well, it's now sun up here.
The reason is the sun arrived on our side now. So.
There we go. So this is really, really cool. And we're about to make a huge jump across a very large pond. Right, Peter? The Pacific Ocean. We're going over to Seoul. So if you want to join Alex and Carl for a few minutes in the San Francisco session, it should be over there on that side of your screen, where, Alex, you can moderate and let people on to ask questions directly, even with their cameras if they want to.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, there. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your participation.
Thank you again.
Thanks. Yeah.